So this session is about editing in ThinkGIS, and we try and do at least one session like this at every user conference. We find that there are a lot of tools, as you know, within ThinkGIS, and we feel like, oh, I shouldn't lean that close to the camera, should I? That's very intimidating, even to me. We find that, you know, unless you have a specific reason to be using some of these tools on a repeated basis, it's very easy to not know they're there. So I'm going to go through some of those tools that our clients are either tangentially aware of or are not aware of at all. And if you didn't download the packet, it will still be available to you. You should have received it, I think, by email as well, but we made it available on the WebEx page for you too. What we're going to be going through is your editing document, which you guys should have. It's only about 14 pages. And the first thing we're going to talk about is renaming. So I'm going to zoom into an area here. And right now we've got this little subdivision. And so I'm going to build a scenario for renaming some roads within this. The first thing you have to do, of course, is lock your center lines layer for editing. And there's a few ways to do that. One is simply by going to my tools and showing my map editing tools. It's going to pop up with the what layers are you going to be working with now. So I can scroll down and say, well, I want to look at my center lines and do some work on those. Probably the most common mistake we see is if a road needs to be renamed or any feature needs to be renamed, what often happens is simply double-clicking on it. Nice try, Dylan. There we go. Double-clicking on it to pull this up, and then typing in the new name here. So 2501 Street, or 2501st Street, let's try that one, road. Let's say it needs to be renamed just from this corner on. Well, to do that, if I just double click on it and do that and type in the new name, well, it's Smith Road now, and say okay, it's going to pop up and say, hey, you're about to make changes to a feature that's not completely visible in the current view. What that means is you can see the highlight running off of the map out here. If I say yes, which a lot of people do, now I've just named that entire road Smith Road. And if I back out, I can see that's probably not accurate. I really only wanted it for this little section. So I'm going to kind of go back to my view here, and I'm going to undo that edit feature. So now when I click on it, it's 2501st Road. So I'm going to clear that screen, and instead of just double clicking on it, I'm going to use my rename tool. And the way the rename tool works is whatever the current layer is and whatever the current feature is, that's what the feature I use the rename tool on is going to be renamed to. So again, let's say this needs to now be Smith Road for this small section here. So first I need to add Smith Road into my current feature. So if I just click on this, I can double check first and make sure there's not a Smith Road in there. And as I'm looking, I don't see one. So I've got to create that new feature. So I'll come over and click on my new feature button. And again, it's important to make sure that the layer you have set as your current layer is the one that you're adding this new feature to. So it is my center lines. And I just type in that new feature. And of course, I type it wrong because why not? So I get it in there correctly. I say OK. That is now my current feature. Now, if I were to just grab the rename tool and come down here and click, you can see it grabs this section of road. And basically what it's looking for is anywhere that there's a break. Now, the fact that I don't see anything beyond this, no highlights beyond this in either way, means that this corner was drawn in separately and it's broken here and here. If I were just to say, okay, yeah, I want to rename that, what's going to end up happening is now 2501st Road is going to be on the east and west of this, but Smith Road is just naming this curve. Obviously, that's not the desired result either. So again, I'm going to undo this. So what I need to do is determine where Smith Road starts and ends first. So I'm going to say, for the purposes of this, it actually starts at this intersection and ends over here at the river. If I use my brake tool now and come down into the map, as soon as I activate that tool, it highlights every vertex on the map. So those little red dots out there telling me anywhere there's a vertex along a line, along a feature, anywhere like that. When I put my cursor on the map, I get that little hourglass. That means I've snapped to that center line. I'm not on a vertex though. When I use the brake tool here and left click, it creates a vertex for me. Not only that, it actually breaks the polyline there. So now if I come down here and I get right on top of that intersection where I'm going to say this center line road name change starts, you can see I get a little box. That little box means I'm directly on that vertex. So I left click again. That puts a vertex there. I right click and I'm out of that brake tool. And a redraw or a clear will get rid of all those highlights for me. Now I can go back to my rename tool. Now I've confirmed that I'm on the right layer and I've got the correct feature in my current feature window. So now I select rename and I just start clicking on all of the sections of the polyline that need to be renamed. And when I click here, it's going to stop right where I put that break. Same down here. So it's broken at this intersection and it's broken over here just by the river where I wanted it, or the creek, excuse me. Once I've got all those selected, I right click and it'll pop up and say, are you sure you want to rename these? If I am, I say yes. Right click out of the tool, hit my clear button, and now I've got Smith Road. If I click on it, I can see it runs the extent that I defined. And then out here, I've got 2501st Street. Up, and you can see there, I missed a little part. So I'm going to zoom in a little closer on that. Yep, I sure did. I missed a little section. So I can just hit rename again, come down, click on that section, right click. Yes, I'm sure I want to change it. And now that's all part of Smith Road again. The rename tool can be used on any feature in the map. So it's most often used, though, on these polylines simply because polylines are going to be reaching out beyond more than just the area that you're zoomed into. As we zoom out here a little bit, you can see lots of polylines with road name changes along here. A lot of times when a road's going north, if it changes direction, it's required to change names because now it's turning into either an east-west driving road, or perhaps there's a township change there as well. Those things can all be managed with this rename tool. I highly recommend using that rather than just the double click and change method. That one is very dangerous and can also cause problems with things that need to be unique, such as addresses. If I were to double click on an address and make a change to it, so here I've got 1631 25 13th Road. And if I say, well, no, that's actually supposed to be 1635. Well, I don't have the layer locked for editing. Let me go in and do that real fast. You can also lock layers for editing in your layer settings. Here on the addresses layer, I can come over to the edit lock column, click on that, and that'll lock that layer for editing. Let's try that one more time. So I double click on it and I say, no, this is actually 1635, and okay. It pops up and tells me, wait, there's already a feature out here with that name. Do you actually want to put it on here? And if I change it and result in duplicate features, then I'm going to have two addresses with the same information in them. That's generally not a good idea in any address layer. We want each one to be unique, especially in a public safety situation. If we put any ambiguity into the layer, it could cause a problem later on if one of those two residences calls 911. Combining both features into one, also probably not a really good option. That would just leave me with two addresses the same way, with the same information, just combined as a single feature. So I'm going to cancel out of that. My point being, with those things, pay attention to those notifications. When they come up, if you're not sure what they mean, call us. Ask for help on that, and we can help you get some clarity on that. Regardless, using that rename tool, especially on polyline features, is probably your best bet when it comes to renaming features out within the map itself. The next part we're going to be talking about is modifying the layout of forms. When I just single click on any feature on the map, over here on the left-hand side, it just gives me what that feature information looks like. When I double click on a feature, it shows me that information in a little more tabular fashion here, and I can fill out any information I need. But what often happens is you get it and you think to yourself, yeah, this is good. It's a little clunky though. And that especially happens when you have a lot more information on a form. So I'm going to click on this damage assessment feature out here. Over here on the left-hand side, as you can see, there's a lot of information being built into this layer. And when I double click on it to try and fill in information, it gets pretty clunky for me pretty quickly. So as I look through here, I can see, wow, there's so much going on in this. I think it could be organized a little bit better for me personally. And again, this is all about how you're using the map personally. So the first thing I need to do is, just like the others, is lock this layer for editing. If you've taken any editing class with me before, you've probably heard me say, only lock the layers that you need locked for that session. So I'm going to unlock my center lines and addresses and only have my damage assessment form set up for editing. The reason I do that is it's really easy to screw up things if you've got more than one layer locked for editing. You can accidentally delete features off a layer you don't intend to. You can alter features on a layer you don't intend to. It's just best to only have those layers locked that you absolutely need locked for editing at the time. So now I've got it locked for editing and I'm looking at this form. I've double clicked on the feature to pull up the information. But I want to break this out a little bit differently. I want to be able to see this information a little bit differently. So I want to modify my form layout. And that's this wrench up here. If I click on that and drop down, with the layer locked, that opens up all of these options down here at the bottom part of this list. And the one I want is modify form layout. Now the form looks a little bit different. Everything's gone gray. There's no information in any of this. That's because what I'm looking at is basically a template for this feature. And this would reflect on any future features to be added to this. These grayed out fields now, if I click on one of them, I could start making changes to them. I can left click and hold and move that that field around. As you can see, I can't move it up. I'm at the limit, top of the screen, but I can move it left and right. I can pull it down here, and I'm just left clicking and holding right now. But I don't really want to change that one. I'm going to leave that one right where it is, but I do want to start moving some things around down here. This is really kind of clumped up on me. I'd like to have the resident information at the top, let's say. So to do that, I'm going to click on the first part of the resident information. And now holding the control button, I'm just going to click down, or excuse me, the shift button. I'm going to click down through the form here. And you'll notice that some of these, when I click on them, the field name highlights. On others, they do not. That means that they were placed separately. So again, I'm going to hold down shift and make sure I highlight everything that I want to move. And I can come over here and scroll down just a little bit. And there we go. So this is all of the pertinent resident information. Now if I left click on any of them and hold, I can drag these over and up a little bit. And I'm just going to plop them right here. And now it looks kind of ugly, I know. But that's all right. Now I'm going to left click, hold down my shift, and grab all of the respondent information. And you see that location field name also was not highlighted, so I got to highlight that, left click and hold. I'm going to drag it down. And I've got a lot of space down here to go with, of course. I can scroll down and take a better look at what I'm looking at. Very simple. Now, the resident information. Again, I'm just holding down shift and left clicking on all of the pertinent fields. And I know how exciting this is to watch. Now I can left click and hold, drag that over here. My resident information is now at the top of my form. The most important part of this, once I've got all this moved to where I want it, I right-click inside of here and say, yeah, I'm finished. Do I want to apply the changes? Yes, I do. Now, when I click on this form, nothing changes over here. The reason for that, the information that's displayed in the left-hand window is based on the actual format of the layer itself. So if I come in here on my damage assessment form and right-click on it in my layer settings and go to my layer format, yep, we'll go ahead and save that. All of that information laid out within this layer format is how it's going to display over here on the left-hand side. If I want to change to have my resident information at the top over here as well, I have to change that within my layer format by selecting, first off, the resident information, move it up to the top, then the mail address, move it up, and so on. I'm not going to mess with that right now because it does take a little bit of time, but I just wanted to make you aware that will display differently here. However, when I double click on it, now I see my resident information at the top of this, respondent information below, and so on. I'm going to go back to modify the form layout again and show you some other things you can do within here. So this damage assessment residential text was added manually by going up and adding text. If I click on that, it's going to say, what do you want to call the text? I'll just say test, plop it in. And now, it's not going to let me grab it. There we go. Now I've got text down here that is going to appear on the form wherever I place it. If I right-click on it again, you have to have it highlighted before you can right-click and make changes. So I'm going to left-click on it first, then right-click and go to Modify. I can now make some changes to it. I can make the text larger, in which case I've got to make sure I also change the field size. So right now the width is 27 pixels wide, 16 pixels high. This is more art than science unless you know exactly how many pixels you want it or exactly how many pixels tall it is going to be if I choose this large setting. I honestly don't know what the default is for that. I've tried several times to figure it out and been unsuccessful. So what I'm going to do is just say, well, let's make it 100 pixels wide and 25 pixels high. Now when I say OK, that's changed as well. So now the field box looks a little larger. I do have the option also of just left-clicking and grabbing when I've got those little drag arrows on at the bottom and the side. So I can move it that way as well to change that text size. Or excuse me, the text box size. Again, I right-click, say I'm finished. Yes, I want to apply it. When I double-click, now I've got text down there. I'll go back in and modify again. Well, it turns out I don't need text down there that says the word test, so I'm going to highlight it, right-click, and delete this. Yep, I want to delete it, get it off of here. If you are a particularly anal retentive person like me and you want all the text pointing out which sections these are to line up exactly, I just need to highlight them. So again, I'm going to click, then I'm going to hold down Shift and click on each other one as I move down through here. Property information, damage assessment, keep scrolling down, insurance information, and other information. Now, whichever of these I want to use is the master. Let's say I'm going to use this one at the very top. If I right-click over it, I can align. And what I'm going to do is align the left edges. And when I do that, it lines all of these up exactly at the same area on the form. So I have all those now following right in line with each other. Again, finished. Yes, I want to apply it. Now when I double click on it, I can see that information has been moved to the correct location on here, and it's all lined up and aligned with each other. Again, I'm going to go to Modify Form Layout under that wrench. The text that has been set out here to the side is just to be able to point out, okay, number of occupants by, and then we have separate fields out here for each one. So by age, I'm looking at under 21, 21 to 64, 65 plus. And then these are filled in manually with the number of occupants who fit that mold. Same down here for the income level. I can say if the total income level of that household is, what is that, 12 to 57 some odd thousand, I just mark that as the 1. And 57,000 and above, I would mark down here. If I want to change any of this information, I just click on that field that's going to appear off to the side there. I right-click over it, modify, and I can say, actually, I want to know if it's under just 12,000 even. Okay? And now that's going to be changed on the form. Same here. I can, again, modify. Okay. And that will set that there as well. These that have the field name just showing with it, because there really wasn't any reason to change or alter that, I can right-click and make some changes to the actual labeling on this, again, by going up to Modify. And in the Modify, I can say, actually, I want that name to be above the field on this one. And when I do that, the change is now it's going to say date above the date field. If I want to consistently do that with each of these fields, then of course I'm going to have to move them a little bit and make room for that field name to go on the top. So I'm going to have to come down here first, and I'll just hold down Shift and grab these 3, move them down a little bit. Property information needs to go down. As you can see, it's really easy to quickly get yourself a little bit into a bit of a mess trying to make room for how you want to organize this data. But it is not impossible. I'm going to move that up just a little bit so I can grab agency over here. Here we go. I could move agency over to the side and then just move name and so on. You get the point. I can start really moving this around and really define how this overall is going to look. Then I'm going to right-click here, modify, put that above the field. Oh gosh, I am so sorry if that was noisy. My mic just fell over. Same over here, right-click, modify, above the field, and so on. When I finish, right-click and say finished. I want to apply these. I'm going to save and double-click. Now you can see I've got those moved around just as I wanted. This, again, all comes down, this form layout comes down to what works best for you personally. Now, this damage assessment form, the only reason I'm using it is because it has so much information in it. It is actually already formatted in the same format as the FEMA damage assessment form, so it's really not one you want to mess around with much, but I did want to use it just for this example. Now, the other thing that you can do with the form, especially one like this where there is a lot of information, is break some of this out into separate tabs. To do that, again, I'm going to go to this Modify Form Layout under the bench here, wrench, excuse me, and I'm going to first right-click inside of here, and I'm going to create a new tab. And that's down here on the tabs, and I say I want a new tab, and I'm going to call it Resident Information. And then I'm going to right-click again and do another new tab, Respondent Information. So now I've got two different tabs, Resident Information, Respondent Information. Respondent Information currently doesn't have anything in it. That's because I haven't put anything there yet. Now I can come down to my Respondent Information, click, I'm going to hold down Shift again and grab all of these fields that are part of the Respondent Information. Once I've got them all selected, I right-click over the top of any of them, and I'm going to move the selection to a different tab. Click on it. I want this to go to the Respondent Information tab, and that's where it's going to go. Now I can do any kind of cleanup I want to over here. I can move my name. Again, I'm just holding down Shift and moving some of these over. My agency under here. And I can also, I'm going to move location down here just a second and select each of these. Not you. Sorry, I didn't mean to grab that one. There we go. Grab each of these, right-click, and align the left edges again. That gets those aligned. Now I could just grab these two, move them over a little bit here, and drop location right above this so I know that that's my location field information. I'm going to right-click again and do another new tab, and this will be the property information. Just as before, I'm going to select one, then hold down my Shift button, and select all of the fields within the property information section. Once I've got them all selected, I right-click, go to my tabs, move to a different tab, and this time I'll choose property information. There they are. Down here, I'm going to do another new tab, damage assessment. Select, hold down Shift, and now it's all the damage assessment information. You'll notice that this one has a $sign set up as a separate field name off to the side of the fields. The reason for that, let me go ahead and right-click and move the selection to a different tab again, this time damage assessment. The reason for that is because putting a $sign within field information can cause problems later if you're doing queries. So by having it as a separate detail out here to the side, a separate piece of text, it's not interfering with the actual data, but it is giving an indication that this is a dollar amount in that field. And do the insurance information. Again, I'm going to do a new tab and grab those. And I know that you've probably got the concept down now, so I appreciate you bearing with me, but I want you to see what the finished product looks like. I'll move this to the insurance tab, and finally a new tab called Other. And for that, we'll grab this other information, holding down Shift again, and left-clicking to select all of those fields, right-clicking over any one of them, and going to Tabs and moving to the Other tab. So now if I right-click in here and say Finished, yes, I want to apply those changes. When I click here, a single click brings the information up over here to the left, and because I have set them up in tabs, they're going to display as tabs. That is also going to change the overall look. As you recall, when I moved the resident information to the top of the form, it didn't change over here on the left-hand side in the information window where that information displayed. That was part of that layer format. But because I've set them up as tabs now and have resident information in that first tab, that is where it is going to display. If I click on the plus sign on respondent information, it closes all other tabs and only opens that respondent information tab, and so on, all the way down through here. When you've got a lot of information, having it broken out into these tabs can really make it easier to manage what you're looking at and getting exactly the information you need without having to troll through field after field after field of data. Double-clicking on the feature gives me the same information here, but I can tab through now to each one. Now you see as I look through these, all of that information is way down where it shouldn't be. That's because when I modified, I didn't go in and move it all up. I can now go in, modify the form layout, then go to each one and say, all right, respondent information. You recall I aligned it all, but I did not do this. Basically, when I move these over to each new tab, they pop up wherever they were on the original tab. So I've got to be aware of where this information displays on the original feature form. And then I saw we had a question come in. I'm going to get to those here in just a bit. Move that one up, and so on all along here, getting those moved to the top. And again, once I'm done, I right-click Finished. Yes, I want to apply it. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now when I double click, those ones that I've moved up are now displaying in the proper location. These still need to be moved up, but I think you've watched me click on things and move them around enough to kind of get the idea on that. I'll take a quick moment here to look at the question I just got. All right, Jennifer Brown is asking, I have noticed that when you change the form layout and try to just add info and click the next field, click to the next field, it may take you further down the form because you moved it from the top. I believe, are you talking about, well, Jen, I think you're talking about if you tab to each field. Is that what you're meaning there? So if I were to tab to the next one and so on, it looks great. But, okay, that's what you're talking about. All right. So that tab information, basically tabbing through a form, let me double click on an address here to kind of show you. If I tab through, so you see when I brought it up, let me double click on another one. When I bring it up, the street is highlighted. If I hit my tab button, ideally what you'd like for it to do is jump to the community, right? But what it does is goes to direction, and then it goes to community, and then I tab, and then it goes to house, and then to suffix, and so on. The reason for that, once again, if I go into my addresses and lock it for editing, right-click and go to Layer Format, that tab is informed by this layout. So from street to direction to community, house, suffix, and so on. Regardless of how they look in that form layout, excuse me, when I'm tabbing, it's based on how they're laid out here. 99% of the time, you can switch this stuff around and it won't affect anything. However, with addresses, basically anything that does lookups like addresses, address ranges, center lines with range information and so on, these first few fields, street, direction, community, house, suffix, all are required to be in this order for ThinkGIS to be able to use them to do an address lookup. We are working very hard to change that. We want to make sure that that gets changed to where it doesn't really matter what the format is. The reason being, as you know, there's more and more information pouring in all of the time for people, especially information coming from outside sources. Hey, I'm getting addresses from my neighboring county. Can we bring those in? Currently, when we do that, we have to do some data massage. We don't change anything about the data itself, but we do change the layout of the layer so that it conforms to our needs to be able to do those lookups. We are working toward getting it so anything that is tagged as an address layer, ThinkGIS will know where to look for the specific fields to be able to geocode and do successful address lookups. So I hope that makes sense on this. Jennifer adds, oh no, you didn't. You just said yes. All right, cool. Now let me get back to where I needs to be. All right. So I just mentioned shapefile information, and that's pretty timely because we are getting a lot of data from shapefiles from different sources all over the place. If you have a neighboring county who is not using ThinkGIS, chances are they're using something that creates shapefiles. And we can take those and import those into ThinkGIS. Sharing data back to someone also can be done through this same process by exporting to a shapefile. I think for several of you, I'm doing that for Julie. Not the person, but the organization, the Call Before You Dig people. Get contacted by them at least once a year for a few of your counties. I think Pike, I know, and Bond, I believe, are some other counties that they ask for information on, and I just get it out to him each year. So I want to go through a little bit of the process of doing this. First off, let's talk about shapefiles for a second. Shapefiles are different than what you might think of as a regular file. Most files, what am I looking for here? Maybe I should stop talking for a second and get to it. There we go. Most files are simply a single file that holds all the information you need. Shapefiles are dependent on any number of associated files. In the case of ThinkGIS consuming shapefiles and exporting shapefiles, there are only 4 critical files that we need. One is the DBF file. The other is the SHP or shapefile. The SHX, which is just basically an information file that tries to collect shapefile information, features that are being used, and so on. And then the projection file, this PRJ file. If I open this DBF file up in Excel, what we get is a breakout basically of the information for that. Now this is a cheat, kind of. I exported the address information for LaSalle County out to a shapefile, so that's why it looks like our format. But you might notice here, discrepancy gets cut off. So we lost our EY on discrepancy. The reason for that is ESRI requires that field names be no longer than 10 characters. So if a field name is over 10 characters, when we export out of ThinkGIS, it's going to truncate that down to 10 automatically. That is why a lot of times on shapefiles, let's open up this one, you might see some different information like these underscores. So rather than legal description, they'll do legal underscore DESC. You get the idea of what the field name is, but it's just not as long. They have to truncate that down to get it to work. Same with zip code. They also don't have spaces in their field names. They won't allow that. So you've got to have an underscore if you're going to use a space at all. You replace that with those underscores. Nope, don't need to save you. You can end up then, when you're bringing in a shapefile, let me go and select under here. We've got some of these that I was pulling in. I think I pulled this in for anybody who had the specific river running through it. I found some information for not only shore lights and where they're located, but also for river mile markers. And just doing a direct import, you'll see information like this across. And if I don't know what it means and I can't find a way to define what it means, and there's nothing really indicating within the field information itself what that field name means, I don't do anything with it. I leave it be because I don't want to put the wrong information in there. So if you're looking at it, you're misguided on what this feature actually does. If I do, however, know what it is, I will make changes as I bring it into ThinkGIS. So how do I import a shapefile? Start with, I go to my tools, come down to import export, and I'm going to import from, and you see you've got a lot of options here. We can import from a DBF file, and that's a little bit different than importing from a text file. We don't really have too many people who use that one. It really only works well if your database file has location information that can be used to actually plot the features on the map in the correct spot. DXS file, we've got less and less of these now. Usually that's just for bringing in files from AutoCAD, but anymore, most AutoCAD users are drawing files with correct georeferencing, and they kick it out as a shape file to be imported. Excuse me. The Excel spreadsheet can allow me to bring in information that has been compiled in an Excel spreadsheet and then geolocate it on the map manually. GPS device, of course, if I go out and collect points on a GPS, I can bring those in and drop them in. GRP file is a really an outdated file system used by the U.S. Census. KML, KMZs are becoming far more often used. Those are Google Earth files. A MIP-MID file, again, really an outdated file type. We don't run into those much at all anymore. I'll come back to shapefile in just a second. I just want to make sure that you guys understand what a lot of this is. Importing from a text file can allow me to import information, let's say from a comma delimited spreadsheet that has location information in it, in which case it can geocode on the map the actual location for those features. So not only does it bring in the feature information, it places them on the map based on either address or lat long, depending on how the location information is put in that spreadsheet. Tiger file, that's just another way to go out and grab the GRP files or other file types that might be used by the census data. However, anymore, census data is being provided almost exclusively in shape files. And that's what we call Tiger data. It's that census data that they collect whenever they go out and do the census every 10 years or so. Imported images is for bringing in raster images or aerial photography images into the map. And the weather image, which creates the layer that puts out the weather radar as selected from this import weather image. If you do have these and you've noticed some issues with it lately, I think we've got them fixed now. We did have an issue. The source that we used for this changed some URL information, but that should all be corrected now in your map. If not, please let us know. All right, but let's get back to what we're really here for, and that's importing from a shape file. When I select that, the first thing it does is says, all right, go find your shape file. Now, if I drop this down, I usually am going to have to browse to where I need to go for this. So in this case, I'm going to go to my Think GIS folder, and I'm going to go into my LaSalle folder. And here are my options for shape files. And I want to bring in this parcels layer. So I select it, I choose open. It asks what I want to do. Really, 99.9% of the time, I'm going to do a regular import. I really don't have too many times where I'm creating labels from a point or polygon. Every once in a while, I might do that if I'm putting out points that have a unique number, and I just want to see that unique number out there as a feature. I don't really need a symbol on the map for it. Sometimes for dimensions layers and so on. If I was bringing those in, I'd probably have to go ahead and just create a label from that point rather than putting the point on the map. But for now, I'm going to do a regular import. I'm not going to combine any like records. First off, it's a parcel layer. There should be no like records at all. It should be completely unique. Depending on what I'm bringing in is going to define how I answer this question. Road center lines, if I just want to have a single road name for all the roads called that out there, I would probably combine those, but I would have to make sure that that's the feature that we're going, the field that would exclusively be used to combine those features. Often shape files carry with them a unique ID field that they put right at the very top, and Think GIS will not combine those simply because that unique ID field is the one being used to define what each feature is called. But in this case, I'm going to say no. I don't want to combine them. Then it asks what I want to do. I can overwrite, I can add to an existing layer, which means if I were to add it to an existing parcels layer, I could end up with a lot of duplicate entities on top of each other out on the map. So I don't want to do that. Overwriting an existing layer would simply take over the information that's currently in that layer and replace it with what I'm putting in here. That can require some field mapping in case the fields are a little bit different between the two. Or I can create a new layer, and that's what I'm going to do in this case. So I say, okay, what do I want to call it? I'm going to say this is the parcels from the shape file, just so I have some kind of distinguishing feature, or layer name in here in case I've got another parcels layer already in here, which I do, and I don't want to confuse the two. So I'm going to say, okay. Then it asks what features what fields do I want to include. Many times shape files have a lot of information that is not at all useful. Unchecking those will ensure that that information does not get imported into the map. But in this case, I want all of this information. So I'm going to keep that all checked, say okay. Down in the lower left-hand corner, I get this little percentage, and it's telling me how much it's advanced and how much longer I've got, basically, as I watch this import. Parcels, obviously, are generally a pretty large layer. LaSalle County is one of the largest counties in Illinois, so obviously it's a very large layer for them. So it's going to take it a moment here to get that all imported for me. When you are importing shape files like this, Don't get too hung up about how the field names and things look. We can fix all that once we've got it in the map going into that layer format. That's what we're going to do here in just a second when this finishes calculating, and we're almost done. Once it's done, it tells you it's done. You get this big, ugly blob on the map because what it does when it brings it in is automatically it defines it as red lines and blue fill on the fill color. So I'm going to go in and set this to be auto and only turn on at like 3 miles. I'm going to turn the fill color to none. And I'll leave these red and just kind of thicken them up so they show up a little bit better when I zoom in closer. So now if I zoom in somewhere on the map, I can see there's my red lines indicating these are all the new parcels that I just brought in. If I click on any one of them, I see the information over here on the left-hand side. Now I can go in and say, you know what, I want to clean up some of these field names and make them into something that's a little bit more conducive to my use in Think GIS. So I can come in here, I can right-click over this parcels SHP layer, go to my layer format. Yep, I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now I can come down through here and say, you know, I don't need that underscore in zip code. I don't need it in legal description. And in fact, I can actually spell out the word description. Tax code the same. As I mentioned earlier, if I'm importing this data for you, I'm going to do this pretty much on an automated basis. If I send you a layer with ugly field names, more often than not, it's really one of 2 reasons. One is that I don't know what that field should be called, so I don't mess with it just in case. The other is I forgot, in which case touch base with me, and if I have, I can jump on with you and help you get these cleaned up. So once I've got those all set, I say OK. It's changed them now in the layer. If I come down here and click on any one of these, now I can see it's changed that field name over here for me. I want to make sure I save, and I'm good to go with this. If it turns out this is exactly what I need, I have an existing parcels layer, like here. I can, as I mentioned earlier, replace that parcels layer with this shapefile information. I'm going to remove this shape information, delete it, get it out of here. I'm going to lock my parcels layer for editing. Tools, import export, import from shapefile, import my parcels here. Regular import, no, I don't want to combine, but this time I'm going to overwrite an existing layer. It says, what layer do you want to overwrite? I'm going to choose my parcels. And now it's going to pop up and ask me to do some field mapping. This is what I mentioned earlier. Basically, I need to tell it where these fields belong in my destination layer, the layer I'm overwriting. As you can see, a lot of these are already named the same thing, but zip code is different. So I've got to select zip code here on the left. This is my source, my shapefile, and then also select it over here for my destination layer, the parcels that I'm overwriting. Same with legal description, same with tax code, property class, township and acres should already be assigned to each other here. But now you'll see as I click up through these, rather than jumping up to none, they're moving to where I've already assigned them. So I say OK. It does its import. Again, it's going to give me the count over here on the lower left-hand side. The nice thing about doing this is that as I get updated information, I'm not having to manage separate layers each time. What I see happen a lot is people will import the new information and call it Parcels 2018. That's great if you need to have an archive of that parcel information. If it's something like public safety where you don't need that archived information, you just want what's most current, I'd recommend overwriting. The overwriting just makes sure that it stays on the same layer each time. It really just helps to manage what you're doing within the map so much better. Now, once that's done, I say OK. I'm going to save it, and then zoom in here to where my parcels come on. I hope this is loading OK for all of you. These aerials are actually being pulled from the web, so they're a little slow once I get zoomed in to where they come on for the first time. Get a little closer so I can get a parcel. There we go. So now I can click on the parcel information. So it's been overwritten with that new information out here. If I want to confirm that it's actually bringing that information over, I could go to a property that I know that it's changed, or I could request that they add a update date field into that original shapefile, and I could bring that in as well, and that could then tell me this is the latest from 2018 or whatever for that. When I want to get this information back out to somebody else, and this is probably the most common question we get when it comes to shapefiles. Hey, somebody's asking for data. I want to give it to them. How do I get that to them? And going into my tools again, import, export, and I'm going to export to a shapefile. And it's going to ask what layer or layers I want to export. So I'll say I want to export my addresses, my center lines, and as you can see, they've got a lot of information in here. I'm looking for my ESN layer, Kurt. Do you know where it is? Probably past. No, it's right above center lines. So once I get all of those checked that I want to put out, I say OK. Now my ESNs were not locked for editing, so we're going to get a notification here in a minute about that, but it's going to say, do you want to use the current coordinate system? If you have been told specifically they want you to use a different coordinate system, you can go ahead and say no and select that new coordinate system. However, anybody with even a scrap of GIS savvy should be able to import anything regardless of the projection that it's exported in. So I always leave it in this the coordinate system that the map was built in, and send it on that way unless otherwise asked to do differently. So I want to use this, so I'll say yes. My ESNs aren't locked, so it's going to ask me, do you want to lock it? Yes. It's going to tell me, I told you guys earlier how those field names, if they're over 10 characters, it was going to truncate those. So I'm going to continue, say yes, go ahead and truncate those. Now it asks me where I want to put it. I'll just leave it in this LaSalle folder, and it's going to generate those. Now it tells me, and this happens a lot with large areas like this, that there might be some geometry issues. I can run the check areas tool and clean it up and then re-export it. I'm not going to worry about that right now though. I'm just going to go ahead and say okay. Center lines need to be locked. Yep, go ahead and lock those. Runs through, truncates the field names again. I'll leave that in the same folder. And finally, the addresses should be popping up here any second now. Truncate some of those names, that's fine. I'll leave it in this folder. And it should be done here shortly. Like I said, they're a big county. You can see this number down here. Those are the number of features within that layer that are being counted through as it exports these. So it moves pretty quickly, even on large layers like this. It's exciting to watch, isn't it? There we go. Once it's done, it says, all right, I've created all of these files. Now, we exported 3 files, but I see 4 listed here. Why is that? If we look, we can see that on the dispatch addresses layer, we have points, but we also have polylines. What that means is there's some polylines that got added to that layer, probably by accident. In those cases, I don't include them because those can cause problems. So when I'm sending this on, I send only the layer, or excuse me, the entity type, that I know it should be. So in the case of addresses, I'm only going to send these point files. If I went ahead and send these polyline files, probably really wouldn't cause a problem. I just like to avoid confusion. I would also then notify the coordinator or the person who does the addressing and say, hey, you know, I had some of these come up as polylines. We'll need to look at that, and I can work with that person to get those cleaned up. It happens every once in a while. You forget what your current feature is when you're about to draw a road, and so you might accidentally draw an address out there, and generally it gets drawn over the top of, and not remove. Those things are very easy to clean up though. Kurt, this is my way of telling you, I just noticed that there's some polylines on your addresses layer, so get with me later and we'll get those fixed. So now I want to get all of these to somebody else. The important thing to do with shapefiles is make sure that you include not only the shapefile, but the other 3 associated files, that DBF, SHX, and PRJ. So here are all of these. I can take them, throw them in an email, throw them up on an FTP site, whatever I need to do to get those to the other person. If I'm going to zip these up, so if I were to right-click over all of these and say send to a compressed folder, I will get them all compressed here in a single file. If I'm going to add this zip file to an email, zip files do get blocked most often by email filters because they can contain bad mojo. So what I generally do is call it rename to zip. So I have my Lascaux dispatch addresses point rename to zip. What that does then is tricks the email filter into letting it through. The person on the other end sees that and knows, okay, I need to rename this to a .zip file. Then I can uncompress it and get to the information in there.
We hope you found this training session beneficial and to your liking. If you have further questions, please contact us at 888-225-5984 or email us at support@wthgis.com.